fastest 3 hours in radio. You're with Brian Kilmeade.
The healthcare situation has stabilized. The fears of overwhelming the healthcare system has not happened, thanks to the phenomenal work of our frontline workers, thanks to all the additional capacity that the hospital system created, over 50% additional capacity in 1 month. Just think of that. Thanks to the work that our federal government did.
And that is Governor Cuomo saying, look, we didn't need the ventilators, we didn't need the beds. We feel as though without a resurgence, we're out of the woods. We were not overwhelmed. They got close, but not overwhelmed. We still need stuff, but not as much as we thought. That is the same thing in Louisiana. That is the same thing in California. That enables people to say, and the president later on today, to put together a blueprint for standing up our country, our economy again after we got terrible job numbers. The president's leaning on somebody that he's talked with before and has great respect for his counsel, and now to name to a council for small, large, and in-between businesses, as well as things like sports to stand up again. The president's going to be tapping former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, who used to run the Heritage Foundation. He joins us now. Senator, welcome back.
Brian, it's great to be with you, and it was really encouraging to be on the call with the president yesterday and some of the top CEOs in this country, and it gave me a lot of confidence that we will soon be back to business.
But one thing I heard came out of that, and I know they were very complimentary to the president, and look, he has constant contact like no president we've ever had in our lifetime with business. He loves the guys and the women that run these things. He wants to know, he knows what he doesn't know. I think that's what the president's great at. But, Senator, compliments aside, the one thing everyone says, and I keep hearing from allies and enemies, is testing. If you want to walk into J.P. Morgan Chase, into that office building, there's got to be some way to know if Brian or Jim DeMint is positive for the virus. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, yes, exactly. I think you're right on the president. It sounded like he was talking to most of these CEOs every day. They were chatting back and forth with each other, also labor unions, farm leaders, and he seemed to know everything about their industry. Just had a great dialogue with them. But I came away with a lot of confidence that these large companies are already sharing best practices on workplace safety, how to bring people back in. And of course, the testing is a big part of it. A lot of areas of the country, like the area I live in, have places where you can drive through and be tested. We have to improve that. We have to get the turnaround. But I think it's fair to say if we're going to open the economy back up, if you're sick or think you're sick, you stay at home until you get a test. So the testing's important, but Brian, one thing I mentioned to the president when he asked me to speak was it's really important that good medical data be released at this point, that we need to know more about the medical profiles, the demographic profiles of those who are most affected and those who have been killed by this, because I think if we knew the facts at this point, most healthy young Americans would realize they were at very little risk if they went back to work or back in public. And there are certainly groups of people with particular medical conditions or older folks who need to be much more cautious. But I think we're going to find when this is all over that millions of Americans have had this without even knowing they had it. And so the media has worked this into a frenzy where people are afraid. And I think if we just had good information at this point, we would see that there's a very small group of people who are in danger. And for the most part, most Americans are not at risk here. So we need to get that information out. You're exactly right on the testing. People need to know if they've got it, and they need to know if they've had it. Because if we can find out, I'd love to know right now, have I had it? I had something like the flu back in January. If I had it, then I don't have to be hiding out somewhere. And like a lot of folks, I could be offering blood plasma to help others. So there's a lot we need to know, but I think America's ready to open back up. And the important thing to realize is this is not a decision between us being healthy and going to work. We've got to do both. if we keep this country closed down much longer, it's going to be a long time before we get back to real business.
I know you have so much experience in so many different things, whether it's war, whether it's economic restructuring, whether it's elections you don't agree with, stimulus packages, and things like TARP. We've never seen anything like this, where hundreds of millions of Americans are told, don't work, give up your livelihood and your dream, and whatever you do, don't come outside. I'm going to give you a ticket for playing catch with your 6-year-old son. I'm going to stop you from using a powerboat in Michigan. I'm going to prevent you from buying a fishing rod in a store that sells fishing rods, but you can buy other things or home improvement items. It is totally out of control right now. You have protests in North Carolina, Kentucky, and Michigan just in one day yesterday because people know what is prudent and what is abuse. Dr. Ben Carson, of all people, who knows the housing industry from the bottom up, what he grew up in, and now he's running HUD, and he knows the elite because he was one of the best surgeons in the world. Cut 25.
We have two choices in a situation like this. We can say, let's just stay shuttered in place until there's no vestige of virus, there's no danger to anybody. And in the meantime, the economic infrastructure of the country is completely destroyed and more people die from poverty than they do of viruses. Or you can say, look, life is full of risk, but we learn how to deal with them. When you go outside the house, you know, you could be paralyzed by fear and say, there are cars going up and down the street. I dare not go on there. Or there's a river. Or I better just sit on the shore and be terrified. Why not just walk down a little ways and go across the bridge? So what we have to do is we have to learn how to live with these risks. We learn how to deal with the virus.
He's singing your song, right?
Well, he's one of the wisest and nicest people in Washington right now, and it's exactly what we were talking about on the phone call yesterday. Is how do we manage risk and keep people as safe as possible? But at this point, Brian, and folks don't like to hear it, the flu season has killed more people than the virus. Now, that may change as we go through the year, and we know there are a lot of unknowns here. But to destroy people's livelihoods and the things they work for their whole life because we're afraid of some risk, it doesn't make sense at this point. And again, going back to where I started, I think if people know the facts, they can make better decisions for themselves. But the issue you brought up a minute ago, I mean, there are a lot of governors and mayors who have become self-appointed dictators way outside of constitutional authority. And this is not going to work. So part of this is getting America back to work and restoring individual liberties. People have to make good decisions voluntarily, but they're going to need better information. And as you said, they're going to need tests to know if they're healthy or sick before they go back to work.
Senator, the other thing is, what do you see your role in it? Because you know the real world and you know the political world and you know how divided we are. What I worry about, and maybe it's unfounded, is some people say the last thing I want to do is turn around my state's economy and stop Joe Biden becoming president. Am I thinking too cynically, or is this something that's actually out there that you thought about?
You're not too cynical, and I'm afraid it's the truth, because this thing was certainly about health care and risk to people's health when it started. But the media has intentionally whipped the public into a frenzy, created a lot of fear. If you look at the news, you would think the whole country is like New York, and even there they overstated the problem and didn't run out of hospital capacity. In areas over 40 states, you've got more hospital capacity than you normally do. We're in a good place in this country in most areas to go back to work. But this has certainly become a political thing. The media jumped on it early because they thought it was one way to tear down the president's biggest accomplishment of his administration was the economy. But I think what I see is a president who is willing to give that up in order to keep people safe. But unfortunately, the other side has been willing to use this to try to destroy him in the next election. So the politics are certainly a part of this, and I appreciate the doctors' inputs. But right now we need to balance doctors with truck drivers and stock boys, and factory workers, because I don't think we can eliminate all risk before we go back to work.
Absolutely. We got to figure out a way to live with it and not hide from it. It is everything that America isn't. We usually take action. In World War II, they asked us to sacrifice, take guns and go to war. Others had to give up their business or sacrifice for their family, go into the job force to replace. Now it's just the opposite, and it's just, I understand it to a degree, but it's got to end. And Senator, what's the next step with the council?
Well, they're getting, again, a lot is pulling together best practices in all areas. We've got to take some of the things that these large manufacturers like GM have done. It's a very well thought out process of workplace safety, but we've got to be able to apply that to retailers and restaurants and theaters and airlines and everywhere where people come together to create an environment where if you can have social distancing, we'll decide whether or not masks are needed. Look at air ventilation. There are a whole lot of things we can do, but life is about minimizing risk, but then going out and enjoying freedom. And I think that's what you heard on the phone call with probably 70 of the top business leaders in the country. And so the president is thinking about health care first. Economics and politics is kind of down on his list right now, and we've just got to join him and get his back because he is really trying to do the right thing. It really made me proud to hear him on that phone call, just dealing with business and people and doing it in a very open and great give and take method. But I think it just gave me the confidence that very quickly we're going to be able to organize moving back to work in most parts of our country. But it will be done in phases. And like it came up, Brian, this is not like turning a switch. When you've got a manufacturer like General Motors or Ford, Caterpillar, they all have hundreds of suppliers along their supply chain. Many of them have gone under. Some have gone bankrupt.
Yep.
You can't put that back together overnight, and every day that we wait, more of this supply chain deteriorates, and a lot of it's international. So it's going to take a lot of work to get America back to work, but it's time to do it, and our health care depends on it.
All right, Senator Jim DeMint, keep us up to date on how it's going and pick up his book, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. Senator, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.